Welcome to the third video in our series, Why Music Students Don't Practice and What You Can Do to Fix It. In last week's video, we went over the basic mechanics of the brain and really got deep into how the midbrain works, the midbrain being the driver of the car. Remember, the brain is a car. It has an engine in the back, the trunk in the front, and the driver in the middle. The engine is the part that moves your body, and it belongs right back here, back where you can kind of feel the hollow between your neck and your skull. Your midbrain lives right in the middle. It comes right up from your brainstem, and it's all that space in there. But today we're going to talk about the forebrain. The forebrain is about an inch beneath your forehead right here, just underneath, between your temples, right here underneath where I'm covering. So the forebrain is an interesting place. It's the only place in your brain where you produce words. In fact, if you put your thumb on the left side of your head and you just went about 1 millimeter deep there, that's called Broca's area. It's the area that produces language. And that's it. One side, 1 millimeter, the size of your thumb. That's all you get. Now for understanding words, you get a little bit more. You get it on both sides, right underneath your ears, but it's still just a little bit bigger than the size of your thumb. It's not that big. Your forebrain, this area here, this is the only part of your brain that thinks. This is the only part of your brain that is working when you're doing what's called read and regurgitate. Compared to your midbrain, and definitely compared to your hindbrain, it's kind of slow. It's kind of clunky. It's just not very powerful compared to the rest of our brain. Sometimes when people are practicing music, they do a funny thing, which is they ask their forebrain to tell their moving brain what to do. But just look at that. If I say play an A, those are words. That goes right here. Then as I hear those words, I have to zoom them back to this way back here, essentially the basement of your brain, in order to actually make that movement. That takes a lot of brain work. So sometimes it's really interesting. I'll hear music teachers say, what's the name of that note? Okay, now how do you finger that note? Now play it. What's the name of that note? How do you finger that note? Okay, now play it. What's the name of that note? Now, note names are wonderful. Kids should know note names. All musicians should know note names. That's not a question. The question is, how do you do it in relation to practice? The best way to get information into the forebrain that should be there and not have it be a huge workout, an overwhelming workout for the brain that isn't necessary, is to separate forebrain concepts from hindbrain concepts. Now, how do you do that? Well, you do that by using storification and gamification. Remember, everything you have to do in a music classroom, you really need to make sure that the midbrain is happy with it. Because if the midbrain's not happy, then nobody's happy, right? To steal a phrase. So, when forebrains are learning information, they learn it best through story. Story gives midbrains something to hold on to while information is coming at you. That's why my boys can tell you all about Star Wars, the whole thing. They can give you tons of information because it's attached to a story. If you are giving your students information that they need to know, like note names, put it in the form of a story. How good is your storification game? When you are actually doing your classes, when you're doing your lessons, how often are you telling stories? How detailed are your stories? How easy is it for your students to grasp on to what you're saying in a story format? How much time are you using during your classes, during your lessons, to actually tell stories? How unique are your stories? How compelling are your stories? I can't think of any concept musically that cannot be made into a story. And when you make stories out of concepts that have to be learned by the forebrain, just information, not things you have to move on. When you make stories out of information, they will just stick better. For more information on what kind of stories there are for different concepts, you can go to the IAM Academy and look through all kinds of stories that you can use for learning note names, that you can use for learning music history, all sorts of things. In fact, the entire curriculum, Music for Everyone, is story-based. Music isn't just about knowing things, it's also about being able to move in relation to you knowing things. So how do you teach someone to move? We'll get into that in the next video.